I think you guys should abandon the idea of using anyone else's templates. If you use anyone else's templates, first of all, you won't sound like them. Second of all, you are going to be hearing things in a different way. So just because you pull up the same plugins in the same order as somebody else means absolutely nothing in the scheme of things. The way that order is and whatever's on there in terms of presets or anything, it's got nothing to do with what you are going to be working on for your stuff. That may have worked for that song that that person did. And if everything's just zeroed out to nothing, there's really no benefit for you to come in, even if it's zeroed out or on a preset, for you to come in and just look at what they did and then be like, oh, I'm going to learn from this because of whatever. It's why they used what they used on whatever that makes the difference. It's the reason they picked this thing after that thing at this point in time in this song. That's really all it is. Let me show you Andrew Scheps giving you his perspective real quick, because this little short clip is going to take it to a new level. Fair use for teaching purposes. Fair use for teaching purposes. Here we go.
If you mix the same song every day for a week, you would have totally different mixes every day, because you start down a path very early on because you're reacting to something you're hearing. You think you're doing the same thing every day, and you absolutely are not. The balance would be different. The sounds you get would be different because you're starting building from a different place. So I don't know how to make it sound like me.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I know how to make it sound like me is limit the shit out of it and turn it into a square wave, right?
We'll talk about Death Magnetic soon enough, Andrew.
The reason your mix maybe doesn't sound as good as you want it to sound could very well be that you've just mixed it for too long. You just overcooked it. That's really all you did. And the concept here, I think, that I like to do, this is something I do all the time. If I'm mixing a song and it doesn't go well, I just kill it and pull up another song, and I come back to it at another time. Because you'll see, if you try to force something done in which you're just not in the right headspace, you're saying to yourself every step of the way, I don't like this song, what's going on with this, it's not working out, you're just looking at it from a negative perspective. If you try to tell yourself, I'm now I need to be happy today. I need to be happy today. You're just making it harder to be happy today. You just have to live and be happy. If you're trying to tell yourself, I hope it doesn't rain. I hope it doesn't rain. You know what's going to happen? It's going to freaking rain outside. So my point is, you got to stop looking at it like, you know, thinking if you're scared of something happening, you're just putting in your head the idea that now this thing means so much to you, and you're just amplifying the fear. All you're doing by thinking about that is amplifying the fear. Whereas if you just forget about it altogether and you come back to it without any of these thoughts of what you hope and what you can't do and what you're upset about, if you just come back with a clear head, you have a way better shot. So a big tip is don't force things. And also notice what he said. If you mix the same song every day, it's going to be different every day. So the way I look at this is you need to get done with that song in one day. And that may be done, meaning the next day you come back to mess with it. You're going to make so many changes that will then ruin what you did the day before, or it'll at least be totally different. It doesn't have to be good, bad, black, white. The point is, it's going to be different and not necessarily better. That's the more you work on something, the worse you could potentially make it. The point is, get it done in a day. Devote the day to it, take breaks in between, spend the full 8 to 10 hours on it. Like, that's something else. People back in the day, years ago, used to think, I'm going to spend a day on a mix. And if they could get done with a day with 2 mixes or 1.5 that day, that's great. A lot of times that comes down to how well it was recorded. Also the type of music it is. Because if you're just putting together a beat track with 2 rap vocals or something, it's a whole different thing than if you're putting together an entire ensemble of a band and violins and keyboards and guitars and bass and real drums. If you're doing all that and vocals, it's a whole different thing than if you're just putting together a beat track and 2-3 vocals. You know, I mean, it's very different, especially since sometimes you can't even get a track out. You may want it because we can make things great if we have all the pieces, but sometimes you can't even get that. So my point is, if that's what you're working on is just a beat track and a couple of vocals, this might not exactly apply. But if you have a full track out of whatever you're doing, or you've got a whole band, you better look at it like, I'm going to spend the day making this great and be done with it after that 8-hour day. be done with it. You know, and if you take an hour for lunch or this and that, then that's what I mean by sometimes it goes 10 hours, whatever, you take more breaks. So you're basically spending a solid 8 hours working on it, maybe a little more, but that's about it. You should devote that amount of time with like a time limit that you give yourself. Don't give yourself forever, especially if it's your own song. Deadlines help us. They allow us to keep it moving, make decisions quickly to actually get through. Now, I'm also a fan of there is no creative clock, but that actually comes into play when you become a little more advanced, because at the early stages, you could take forever working on a snare sound and you might not be helping anything. You're just wasting time. So if you do give yourself some kind of time or time limit, you'll actually be forced to make a choice and move on much quicker. And that kind of working will help you. It will also get you out of the mindset of thinking the more days I spend on this, the better. Because if you can hear what he just said and really let it hit, let it get inside, what he's saying is every day you mix it, it's a different mix. So it's like you're starting from scratch every single day, even if you're not. So the most I'll do is mix it in a day and then come back the next day for final tweak things. But I've committed to what I did the day before. That's my concept of no matter what, it's a one-day mix. And then the next day with fresh ears, you may make some tweaks here and there. But that's it. Like you're not doing anything other than some tweaks and then being done. Because if you allow yourself, you'll mix the whole thing again from scratch and it'll be different. It won't be necessarily better, but it'll be different. And 9 times out of 10, when people do, you know, these 2-day, 3-day, 5-day, 7-day mixes where they're spending all this time on it, you've just created 7 different mixes is what you've done. And if you've listened back, like we talked about, everybody knows the first one, the second one's usually the best one. You start going down these rabbit holes and things get worse. So, you know, I just want everybody to know, I'm not looking at it like you guys can't have the open mind and to be able to hear what you've done and only edit it in a positive direction. I'm just saying that is super rare. So unless you consider yourself to be that good that you can do that, I would recommend not doing that. And most of these guys that are pros have a schedule because they got tons of stuff to do. So they're not allowing themselves to do that either because it would just make them fall behind the schedule. So they're working in a way where it's forward progress all the time, schedule, gotta get done, here we go, keeping it moving. That's just the way to work. There's no way that it's better if you spend a crazy amount of, you know, investment in every single second of everything so that it takes you 2 weeks to do a mix. That's never been helpful. You can do that on a quick level and be done in 8 to 10 hours, no matter what, no matter how many tracks, no matter what it is. I mean, the worst songs are the ones that are super long, 7, 9, 10 minutes, because they just take so much longer to do, because it's basically like you're mixing 2 songs. It's kind of the same thing, because if there's, I mean, you have to basically sit, most songs, 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, like typical length, let's say. When the song is done, now it's half the time as it would have taken you just to listen through to the whole thing at 7 minutes, 8, 9, 10 minutes. So those songs wind up taking longer, but you still try to get them done with this thought process of one day is all I got. Because if you look at it that way, at least you're in the same mindset, the same feelings and emotions, the same path you went down to start it. You're there. And then if you have to listen the next day and you listen with the committed mind of I made all my choices, now I just got to make little whatever tweaks. In other words, the next day, things may pop out to you once your ears are totally refreshed after hearing nothing while you slept the whole night, and you hear it the next day and you're like, oh, you know, vocals are way too loud. Then, all right, make the vocals a little lower, but you're not changing up the balance of the entire thing and being like, damn, now the bass should come up, now this should come up, now this. You shouldn't be looking at it that way. You should be little tweaking, you know, 0.8 in any direction, no problem, whatever, but you got to literally get out of there because you'll make it worse. You will, and this will force you to be good quicker. Whereas if you give yourself a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks on every mix where you're going to constantly change it constantly, you're never allowing yourself to stick with your initial decision, and you're putting in your head the same concept of, ooh, I hope this doesn't happen. I hope the bully's not there when I walk around the corner at school. You're just putting all this fear and anticipation and crazy stuff in your head. Whereas if you just forget about the bully, he shows up, you deal with him. It's different. It's totally different, all right? So I'm just saying, you got to not go in expecting to be afraid. You go in thinking to yourself, I'm going to be great today and make this thing great. And that's why where I started about, if it just ain't going well, then abandon ship on that track, do a different track. And then you come in on a different day and do the whole thing. Because that's what I mean by like the 1 day concept, where your head is at is everything. Don't start down a path, then it's not going well. Then you put in 7-10 more hours. Then you come back and do it all again from scratch. Like you're going to avoid that completely. If when you start, it ain't going well, you just move on to another song. Way better, way better, way better. Trust me. Even, and this is also a benefit to get, if you can, more than one track from an artist, because you can really like work on the same kind of thing and you'll figure it out on another song, and that may allow you to get that other one you aren't working on better, because you will sort of see things from another angle, but you'll often be getting a vocalist that sounds very similar. The instrumentation will be the similar, similar as the other one. The arrangement might be, you'll be getting things, basically another viewpoint of the same type of stuff. So it will allow you to then use that as a way to decode the other mix you were working on that you couldn't really figure out per se. That's how I look at it. I look at mixes as like puzzles. The goal is to solve the puzzle, and the way you can solve the puzzle is always to figure out what the key is. There's some key to it. And Andrew Scheps had mentioned this before, and I think it's huge. Only a few things got to be important on any mix you do. In other words, the vocal, critically important. Usually, if it's a rock track or pop or something, the snare, the kick, got to be very heard, especially clear, present, heard. And something, and pick one or two other things, but that's it. And then everything else you need to spend so little time on. Just get the volume right. You don't need to sit there EQing a tambourine. You don't need to sit there EQing, a shaker for an hour. It's like, these are ridiculous things to do. If there's 17 guitar tracks and most of them are just, playing rhythm stuff in the background, just get it where you can hear them, take out anything that hurts, and you're good. You don't need to sit there and like recraft the whole thing and EQ frequencies out, and especially don't solo it, sweep through and pull out stuff that you don't like. That's the worst thing you could do on vocals, guitars, bass, anything. Do not solo it, sweep through with a tight band on a bell and then just cut things out. Do not do that. All right? Just listen to the track all together all the time, make your moves, and get through it. That way you'll keep perspective. Take breaks along the way. Get done in a day. That's my concept. I hope you dig it. Throw your concept, if you got one, about this style, about how long does it take you to usually do a mix. Also, keep this in mind. If you record self-recorded stuff, like if you're doing it yourself, it could take you way longer, because it's very possible that no one helped you along the way with the engineering, so everything could be out of whack. Especially if you're recording drums yourself, things could go bad real quick. But anything, literally anything. If you're doing bass yourself and stuff, a lot of times with bass, I used to try to do an amp sound and a direct sound. Nowadays, I'm just direct all day, because with the preamp I use, the EQ I'm using, going into the compressor I'm using, going into the converter I'm using, things sound great. I don't need an amp sound. I really don't. So there's all sorts of ways to get things done, but that's, Chad Blake was talking about that. I'm like, you know what? I'm going for it. And I've never been happier with my bass sound. So there's not always a need to do all of this. I also use the Andy Wallace trick where I'll pull up a chorus sound on the bass. We got another video coming on chorus sounds real soon, so I'll get into that next time. This is Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Throw something in the comments. I really appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't already. You guys got this. Take it easy.